Hi, my name is Ben Miller and I'm a physical therapist here at Total Physical Therapy in Amarillo. And today we're going to continue our installment on looking at different research articles about running and try to apply them to our lives as runners. And so our question today is looking at what effect does strength training or heavy strength training have on our 5K times. So does it make it faster, does it make it slower, things like that. And so to help us answer this question, we're going to look at this research article, and its title is The Effects of Sport-Specific Maximal Strength and Conditioning Training on Critical Velocity, Anaerobic Running Distance, and 5K Race Performance. And so before we can start going into this article a little bit, we kind of have to figure out what critical velocity in anaerobic running distance is. So in a nutshell, I'll try to make that brief. Critical velocity is termed by a running coach, Tom Schwartz, who uses a lot of these types of workouts in his running. Theoretically, it's a pace where you're running at metabolic steady rate. And so theoretically, you could run at this pace indefinitely, but in practice, it's a pace that you actually hold for about anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes before you are exhausted. And for all of you that know your VO2 max out there, it's a pace that's held around 90% of your VO2 max. So that's what critical velocity is. So what is anaerobic running distance? So theoretically, anaerobic running distance is the amount of distance that you could run if you only used the energy that is stored in your muscles. Now that we kind of know what those two things are, let's kind of dive into the study a little bit. And so this study looked at 16 moderately trained recreational athletes, and they split them into two groups. One group is endurance only group, and then the other group was endurance running, but also the strength training component. And they're comparing what happens if you have endurance running plus strength training versus no strength training. And so what they did for the endurance group is they made them run anywhere from 3 to 5 days and for about 3 to 5 hours a week. At a low to moderate intensity. And so both groups were doing both of those things. And then the strength and conditioning group, the way they did their exercises is that they would perform lunges, parallel squats, Romanian deadlift, and calf raises. And the way they performed these exercises is they would perform 4 sets of 4 reps at 80% of their 1 rep max. So prior to this test, they determined what is the maximum load you can lift for this lift. You multiply that by 80%, and they would do that 4 times for 4 sets. They were instructed to perform the lift as quickly as possible, so not only was it heavy, but they were trying to make them go quickly, and they were trying to also enforce that they were doing it with good form. Between each set, they would rest for 2 minutes, and that was how they did their strength and conditioning workout. So this study actually takes our question and kind of takes it a step further. The way they did it is they had them do this for 6 weeks, and then they would retest their 5K time after 6 weeks. And then they continued the research article and decided to go an additional 6 weeks. But this time, the second 6 weeks, they had both groups only doing endurance running. So the group that was doing the strength training no longer did strength training. And they were trying to determine what would happen if they trained for strength training for 6 weeks, then took it away, and then for another 6 weeks, what would happen. So what are the conclusions of the study? So the strength and conditioning group demonstrated a decrease in anaerobic running distance and improved 5K time. Their 5K times improved by 45 seconds on average for the group over the first 6 weeks that they were doing their strength training. And the endurance group showed no change at all. And so there was a big difference there between the strength training group and the endurance only group. And then the second 6 weeks, once they took away the strength training group then actually lost all of their gains that they had and ended up right at the same, actually to the second, on average, to the second, the same average time for their 5K time. So the second 6 weeks, they took away the strength training and lost all of their gains. So what is this study trying to tell us, or what can we get from this study? So what we can get from the study is that heavy resistance training actually does improve 5K time trial performance if performed like the way it is done in this study over 6 weeks. What it also tells us is that if we were to take away that training, we can actually lose our gains. So if we are approaching a race and we want to make sure that we taper well for the race, you need to make sure that you do it appropriately and don't take away strength training altogether. You need to maintain that all the way up to a certain point before you start removing it. If you take it away too soon, you're going to lose all the gains that you had from doing your strength resistance training. What is the study not saying? So the study is not looking at other types of runners. So they were looking at people who were running or were moderately trained recreational athletes. They weren't necessarily looking at elite runners, and they necessarily weren't looking at beginner runners either. And so now there are other studies that look at these groups, but this specific study is looking at a moderately trained recreational athlete. So a second thing that it's not saying is it's not talking about other different types of strength training. This is specifically looking at heavy resistance and performing quickly. There are other types of strength training that you can do where you do low reps and easy weights. That's not necessarily the type of strength training stimulus that this article is talking about. So the last thing that this article is not saying is it's not necessarily looking at what happens when you add strength training on top of speed work. And so a lot of runners, in order to prepare for 5Ks, will do a lot of speed work. Note that in this article, they're only doing low to moderate intensity runs. So they're doing a lot of easy running, and then they're adding strength training on top of that. And so this article doesn't necessarily play into the dynamics of what if you're doing speed work and then add resistance training on top of that. The authors theorize that it could react a little bit differently if you start adding speed work. But the fundamental idea is the same. If you add strength training to your program, then the chances of your 5K time increasing are actually really good. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and give us a like. And also, if you guys have any future ideas or future topics that you guys like for me to cover, go ahead and put those in the comments below, and we'll see if we can find any research articles that address those. You all have a great day.